I am ready to introduce our next speaker. He's the last speaker for this session. His name is John Tarpley. John, I want to prompt you to have your press mute and video so you're ready for us. John is Chief of the Regional Operations Branch for NOAA's Office of Response and Restoration, Emergency Response Division. He manages the scientific support and spill response program nationwide. Another fun fact is that in 2019, John was selected for the Oil Spill Task Force Legacy Award. So I just wanted to point that out. And you are ready to go, John, there? Let's go. Looking forward to hearing your presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Jennifer. I think I found myself in an unenviable place between talk about charismatic megafauna and a break. So I will try and make this interesting and quick. This spill that I attended was not in the Northwest or anywhere on the Pacific. Well, it was on the Pacific coast, but of South America, of Peru. And Meg contacted myself and Brandy Todd, our scientific support coordinator down in New Orleans, about this spill, and if there would be something with some lessons that could be applied to Pacific States, BC. And so we thought there was, and I hope that I can give you a little bit of something. But after hearing a lot of the discussion and seeing a lot of the polls this morning, or this morning, I think everybody's on top of this. So let me give you a little view of what happens or what can happen in a country that does not have laws and regulations like the United States and does not plan like all of you do. Let me give you a little window on that here and some lessons learned. Again, Brandy Todd was my partner in crime down there. We were the two NOAA reps that went down with the U.S. National Response Team, including U.S. Coast Guard, National Strike Force members, to Peru to advise the Peruvian government on this spill. And so next slide, please, before I'm getting ahead of myself. So real quickly, this is kind of what happened. So January 15th, the spill happened. It broke at an offshore pipeline. That there was a tanker in. It was an offshore mooring, several miles offshore. They were unloading the crude oil, Brazilian crude oil, and it was the same day as the underwater volcanic eruption over in Tonga that created a tsunami throughout the Pacific. And the story goes that the ship was hit by about a 2-meter wave, tsunami wave, and it rocked the ship. And down where the hoses connect to the pipeline on the bottom, in about 60 feet of water, is where the pipe broke. And they went back and forth for about a week on who was responsible. The ship immediately shut down the fuel, but you had all the crude oil in the lines and whatnot. And this 11,900 barrels was kind of the estimate back in February. I don't know. I've seen other numbers. I don't know what the final number is, but that was the approximate number back when we were responding in February. And so it was going to the Repsol refinery onshore, which is a Spanish company. And it took about a week, like I said, before Repsol basically agreed to, I don't know that they accepted any fault, but they certainly accepted to deal with the response. They brought in their international team from Spain, and things really started moving after that. You can see some of the basic stats on impacts there. 35 miles ashore. I've seen that number go up to 60 miles. I don't know if that's where birds were collected, tar balls were collected, or whatnot, but when we were there in February, it was actively over 35 miles, 5 different marine protected areas. And again, we were there to support the government of Peru. A little bit different activity than what we do here in the United States. Next slide, please. So this was our mission. This is what we were requested to do. So these international things go between departments of state or the embassies. And so Peruvian embassy asked the U.S. embassy or U.S. Department of State, we want some help from the United States. They actually put a broad call out. There were other countries that were providing resources as well. We immediately, NOAA immediately started working on satellite imagery and oil spill trajectory work like we traditionally do. And then we were communicating with folks down at the appropriate agencies in country for that. And then these other four, the site assessments, cleanup issues, wildlife issues were done more on scene, which the Coast Guard and the NOAA team went down to do. And on the right there, you can see a little, it's kind of a cumulative footprint of the oil that was seen from the satellite. It never went very far offshore, about 12 miles is all, and but it went mainly up coast. And Peru, it was just north of Lima, and that's about 11 degrees latitude, south latitude, so we're below the equator. And very hot and dry. Next slide. So the first challenge, and I will say the first challenge beyond responding in a COVID situation, because we were back in January, February, still very much in COVID protocol, and that made it difficult, but we worked through that and we got down there, and believe it or not, it was not a problem in Peru. People were double masked everywhere we went. They didn't have the political issues with whether or not it was safe or not safe or whatever. Everybody was double masked. So I'm happy to say that none of us on the team got COVID while we were down there. But one of the things we ran into right away, and we did not really understand this going in, we had a lot of preparation talk with our U.S. Embassy folks, but there's no legal framework or regulation concerning marine oil spills in Peru. As Meg was kind of reviewing our history on the West Coast here this morning, this might be their wake-up call to start that process like we had with the Nestuca and Exxon Valdez. So when we got down there, there was really no responsibility per se on or financial liability for the companies, either the ship or the facility. Onshore facility, there was no regulations, there were no OSROs, there was no money. They have no oil spill liability trust fund at a state or local, county, federal level to deal with this. And so for those that know a little bit about how things work elsewhere in the outside of the United States, International Maritime Organization has several different conventions for pollution response, and there are ways that countries can become member states to those conventions, and then they're protected by some international law and funding. Well, Peru is not a member of any of those, and so we didn't even have that to fall back on in terms of getting international support financially. So this was a big deal. This was like the tip of that iceberg that then cascaded into challenges all the way down to the very lowest level. Next slide. I'm kind of getting into some of the lessons. Well, it was just that bottom piece on that last one. If you just go back, and this is just, know your laws, right? So all the states here in the province, we all have different laws, slightly different, similar but different. Know what's what, know what you can do and what the industry is supposed to do. know the strengths, know the limitations. We've identified some of those today. I've heard some of that. We haven't yet identified everything, and nothing, no state is perfect in doing this. So there's always new things to be discovered and exercised. Okay, next slide. Go on to challenge number 2, and the biggest one here is really just a lack of planning, a lack of preparedness. I've grown up in the oil spill world in the early 90s, and putting area contingency plans together and GRSs and site strategies and you name it, all those kind of things, and they had none of it. They have none of it. There is no area contingency plan. There is no local OSRO. The only reason there was an incident command, and I say incident command because Repsol's international team came in and they know about ICS. They put it together, but it was not unified. So the government was not involved in that command structure. The government was clearly outside and just telling them what to do, but not meeting with them. It was not appropriate for the government and industry to be seen together or to be talking. So that was a very different situation than what we do here in this country. There was a lack of trained responders. The agencies didn't know their roles in a marine oil spill response. They do have, Peru is a fascinating country, very, very diverse. I mean, and the head of the Amazon River starts in their rainforests on the other side of the country from the ocean. And so they have oil exploration up there, and they deal with a lot of oil spills on inland, on land and in river systems, and they've got protocols for that. But they were trying to kind of apply groundwater principles and land spill principles to the marine environment, and it just wasn't working. They were really out of their element in that regard, and they were trying, but it just they hadn't worked those scenarios. They haven't done the exercises. They really didn't know how to approach it, and there is, like we were talking about in the chat earlier, communication is so critical. Down there, I can't say that I understand it, but the agencies wouldn't talk to each other, which made it very difficult for us coming in, being requested by the Peruvian government to work with their response agencies and get them, to answer questions, provide them with plans, help them work through things. When they wouldn't talk to each other. So it was a lot of duplication of effort, and everybody wanted to sample something, but they didn't know what or why exactly. Those that were sampling wouldn't share data, or the others wouldn't trust their data. So not only that, but communications. The Coast Guard, the Peruvian Coast Guard finally, who basically took the lead for the government, forced field trips with the agencies to go and show them all, so everybody would try and get on the same page. But even on those field trips, the agency biologists and whatnot, officials wouldn't speak to each other. They would speak to us independently, but they wouldn't speak to each other. And very different setup down there. And I hope, again, this is their wake-up call to improvements. And so there have been, and I will say also, one of the big things that we helped out on, especially Coast Guard, was worker health and safety issues. Because of this planning and lack of preparedness and whatnot, the volunteers or the people who came and got paid by the company to start cleaning up oil on the beaches, again, no such thing as HAZWOPER down there. Our Coast Guard folks really helped improve that. And also, as they brought in Oil Spill Response Limited, an international cleanup company to start overseeing them, and Lemoore brought in a lot of equipment to start improving the health and safety of the workers, with basic things like water and toilets and a little bit of shade in 90+ degree weather down there. Again, it was their summer, not the January timeframe. So
Hey,
next
John,
slide.
Meg, you've got just a couple more.
Okay. So lessons learned. I'm covering a lot of these things, and we all know this, I think, but it really is a team effort. No one agency can do it. It takes all of us, and we all have our responsibilities. And whether you're looking at this as an individual, or you're a team lead, or you're, one of the, the office directors here, really got to get at training and what are your people trained to do, from position specific training to the organization, and then exercises and testing the plans and building those plans ahead of time, so that when we do come together, it's not a surprise. We know how to work together, and it gets done, right? And we're not duplicating efforts, but we're enhancing each other's efforts. Okay, next slide. My third challenge here, that I thought was quite, it hit us pretty hard when we actually talked to some of the fishermen. But as we all know, it's easy to close a fishery. It's hard to open one up, and that's what happened down there. They closed the fishery. But it really wasn't the commercial fishery per se. It was the subsistence or artisanal fishermen that were closed down. And these are the guys that are fishing close to shore and selling their product locally. And so their source of income immediately stopped. And then that also shut down. It had a ripple effect through the fish processing plants, and a chain reaction on those workers. There was some payments to those folks from the refinery, but it didn't continue very long. And there was just no way to open up the fishery. They were asking us, but it just, like here in every state. Go to the next slide. There is different agencies that have those responsibilities, on opening up, what not only for the safety of the fish as food, but then the safety of the workers. And they just had no mechanism to do that. They did not have a scientific process. They did not have the analytical capability. And again, there was no outreach or public information. They did not have a public health assessment unit, which Rachel talked about, and it would have been fabulous if they did. And I'll just mention this picture here in this slide is, this is 3 weeks after the spill. This Brazilian crude was really a strange thing. There was still fresh oil on the water. In this picture, you can see kind of a mousse, an oiled mousse that would form, that tan stuff. And then the black on the shoreline there, you got rocky and then sandy. That's all just pure oil. And this is a place where there was going to be no cleanup whatsoever, because it's just impossible to access. Okay,
Hi, John.
Yes.
It's Jennifer, and I just wanted to see if you're at a good point where we could wrap up shortly and get ready for your break. Not that I wouldn't like to hear from you all day. Thank you.
Yep. No, it's fine. Next slide. I think my last one. Yep. So these are our recommendations that the U.S. team put to Peru. I'll let you look at those and stop there and see if you have any questions. Next slide is just last slide questions. But everybody's ready for a break. So feel good about what we got. I'll say that. Feel good about what we got. It comes with a lot of hard work, but it's all worth it in the end, because we saw something a little bit different down there, and it was painful to watch when we know it could be different, as it is in most places around the world.
Good. Well, thank you so much, John. I don't see any questions in the Q&A. I do see a comment. OSRL has good resources section on their website and good practices and guides from their international experiences, and a link in the chat there. So thanks for that, Varen. And I'll let questions trickle in, but really appreciate your experience and sharing your experience with us. from Peru. And again, I think you're right, pointing back to some of the experiences that folks have had on the West Coast. You know, we have a lot still that we can be doing always, but we've come a long way as well.